I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Lika Levskaya, who has over 20 years of experience as a practicing clinical psychologist, including an MA in family psychotherapy from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and a Master's of Science from UF in medical microbiology and biochemistry. She currently works as a corporate staff psychologist, as well as assisting a startup in working to develop a promising molecule related to longevity. Lika became passionate about transhumanism and radical life extension over a decade ago and educated herself on molecular genetics, genetics and microbiology, and virology from American University to further understand the mechanics of human biology. In the last 7 years, she has been reviewing prominent research papers on longevity, rejuvenation, regeneration, genetics, and all of these things inspired her towards concepts in extreme longevity, centenarians, and the psychology of longevity. So, Lika, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
I want to start out with your background and interests. So you have an education and career in psychology, and that was the thing that really interested me about your background because, I think when you look at longevity and transhumanism and life extension, these are areas where the science is moving forward very rapidly, but the psychology of it hasn't really been explored that thoroughly. And it seemed like you would be the perfect person. So thank you for joining me. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Basically, so what got me very interested in psychology in the first place, just human emotions. And it is true to say, and I've talked to numerous of psychologists, colleagues of mine throughout the years, what inspires us to become psychologists. It's basically we would love to learn about ourselves further. So the intrinsic interest is, of course, to learn about yourself, about your emotions. A lot of people come to this profession, it's true to say, with trauma that is unhealed, and then that subconsciously they're trying to heal the trauma. So, but I'm moving a little off topic. So what got me interested in further to study psychology of longevity? It's a field that it's very developing as we currently talk, and like you said, rightfully so, that it's in the very beginnings of it. There are actually clinical studies in variety. It's actually in gerontology and in medicine and so on, even in psychology, but not so much, but covering those subjects. And when we talk about a life extension or radical life extension or longevity, we tend to talk more about centenarians, people who actually super long-lived individuals versus just long-lived individuals. And there's actually a couple of things, and I'm not going to position myself humbly is kind of saying that I know something. There's certain things I probably will talk about. Hopefully that's going to be some new information, but I'm not going to position myself as an expert in this, because there's a lot of people who study that and they're very well educated and erudited in this, right? So but I'm going to talk about a couple of things. So I don't know if I answer your question or not so far.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think in an emerging field like this, really, we're all trying to, I think my word of the week has been intersectionality, right? And so, with psychology and life extension and things like that, we're trying to apply what we've been able to take from other fields to this new and emerging field, So I'm not sure if really there is any expertise, but I certainly the value that you bring to this is remarkable. So what's interesting to me, one of the big things, this is something I've noticed, when you start to talk about extreme longevity, that they're saying 120 to 150 year lifespan, potentially longer, right? If we can push medical science. I've met a lot of people who say, well, I don't want to live that long, and it seems like they're locked into a paradigm, not surprisingly, right? And this is the paradigm of life on Earth: is you born, you age, and you eventually pass and try and leave behind a legacy of some kind. Um, Psychologically, how difficult do you think it will be for people to change that paradigm to something where there is no set life expectancy?
I think I thought about this for a long time, and I actually sort of run unofficial social experiments or social discussions on different themes like that, and it's very interesting to see how different people react to that. So, for example, the common question that I would ask my friends or maybe my clients or random people. So, if you had an opportunity to live, let's say, 200 years or 300 years, how would your life change? What would specifically change in your life? And some people get very excited, and some people, there's a lot of mistrust. It's like, oh, it's nice to fantasize about things, but I don't really, well, there's more. And it's interesting enough because I was talking to younger generation about that because I work with young people, and I have a chance to talk, like we're talking about 20 to 30, so basically the next generation. And it's a little bit sad, unless they're transhumanists and they're inspired or burning with this desire for life extension. There's kind of like a very sad, I would say, no to that, because, oh, well, I don't want to think about what's going to happen in 100 years, so I have bills to pay right now, and I live day at a time, and there is a war happening, and there is some adversities is going on, so I don't have time to even allow myself to think about things like that. And this is kind of sad in a way. And so what I think will happen, hopefully, with when I was growing up, where I got this idea about this transhumanism, the life extension, and stars, and potentiality, and all these fantastic, beautiful things, it was from science fiction books. I was totally living on them, and I will make a confession: I still read them and I still enjoy them. So where I get those inspiration for future. And so now, since the media is so open, there's so much information, my hope is the new generation will sort of educate and get inspired, at least the big section, to make the difference enough in this world will get excited about those things. That's my hope. And I do everything possible in terms of talk to younger generations, talk to people about, explain why is it possible, because a lot of people say, well, yeah, of course that would be nice, but they don't believe it's possible. And I say, hey, there's new medical advances, the new research is actually shows that there's evidence there's possible. We're moving really rapidly to that direction. There's medical innovations, there's genetic therapies. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, and I know you will probably ask these questions later on, but there's two or three things I really want to talk about. That's, to me, they're very exciting in the field of gerontology and the human psychology.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I did want to touch on science fiction as your inspiration. Everyone, I think, when it comes to life extension, and I'm changing topic a little also. It seems like everyone has an event, right? Now, in the case of Dr. David Sinclair, who was one of my favorite researchers, his mother died of cancer. And in fact, my first wife, it was the same way. She died of ovarian cancer. And I think, when people are touched by an event like that, they start to ask difficult, not all the time, but they start to ask difficult questions. They say, why? In my case, my first wife was 44 when she passed. And yeah, and I had deep introspective questions. I said, why so young? You know, um, and so that was my inspiration. That was really one of the things that got me involved. But you'd mentioned science fiction, which I think is more positive and uplifting. So you've been reading about this and you were inspired towards longevity. Can you tell me about some of the influences there?
Oh my God! So Isaac Asimov.
Isaac,
I
okay.
maybe I'm not pronouncing, but in Russian, I am Russian by nationality, Isaac Asimov, but Isaac, probably Asimov. I read everything, and I will actually proudly say there's probably no book or novel or anything that I haven't read. So I'm a total fan, 100%. So I've read everything, right? So you name it, I probably read all the classics I've read. It's an amazing story. So The End of Eternity is my favorite novel by Isaac Asimov.
Okay. With Asimov, I read Foundation. I really liked Foundation.
Yeah.
And the idea of psychohistory, actually, I still think that there is a tremendous merit to that idea. It just hasn't been fully implemented yet. That was interesting. And then he also wrote a series on the history of the Roman Republic and Empire that I read when I was a boy. So, and that was probably easy read compared to some of the other material that's out there. So in terms of actual life extension, you touched on this. What I'm aware of right now is David Sinclair, his team, because you've got George Church, you have Sinclair, you have some other things. Sinclair is working with a couple of molecules that basically take methylation off of DNA, and I can't remember the name. They're NAD precursors. I remember in it.
NMN.
Yeah, there's NMN, yes. And they had said on that they had rats in the lab that were past their test animal lifespan. And if I remember right, he said they had to reset their treadmills because they'd never seen a rat do 3 miles on a treadmill before. They literally had to recalibrate, and these are elderly. So there's that. And then he just recently published about partial cell rejuvenation using 3 of the 4 Yamanaka factors, right? So yeah, as you mentioned, this area is moving forward so rapidly. It's insane. I mean, it's impossible to keep up with it. What are some of your favorite therapies? What are some of the favorite things that you are excited about?
Well, partial reprogramming, I think, is definitely a revolutionary breakthrough, and it's just a matter. Like I knew about this therapy probably because, as I said, the last 7 years I'm really without being too proud about this, but I'm really on top of those papers, and just every fresh paper I'm on it. I'm like, oh my god, it's so exciting because it gives you a real hope that it eventually will happen, and I know for a fact that it will happen. It's just a matter of time. So with this Yamanaka factors, I believe with the right combination, with the right testing, and there's a lot of scientists on it right now, like you mentioned, Dr. Sinclair, which also my one of my favorite scientists there. So and we have an amazing result in Belmonte. Look at those results, right? So there's different methods that they're taking, the partial reprogramming, the dosage, and etc. So eventually, I believe it will be a safe therapy for humans. Absolutely. But what I also, and as I said, I am not a prominent scientist, so whatever I say is just with the grain of salt, obviously, and it's my synthesis, and I'm very careful about making any kind of statements. However, from synthesizing the information, what I've noticed, old age, it's a so it cannot be just one pill or one therapy that will reset. It's most likely it's a complex. It's a complex thing that will require a complex solution. So it could be different things, I believe, and it probably through some time. So there's different methodics, there's different things that we will have to implement in order to reverse the age, rejuvenation, basically the idea. So,
Yeah.
it's and nicotinamide mononucleotide molecule that Dr. Sinclair is working on, and there's different things that we're very, very excited about. And there's actually one thing that through some synthesis of articles that I'm working on as well. So we're going to have some, hopefully this year, we're going to have some things moving forward with this component.
Now, is there anything that you can share about that yet, or is it still too early?
I think it's super early. The only thing that I can share that a lot of, and I'm not going to say anything new, there's nothing, anything revolutionary here, but a lot of things that probably going to be very prominent in this is we're looking at the development very early in life.
Okay.
Very
okay.
like some processes that take place could be very helpful in what we're trying to achieve, the reversal.
Yeah. It seems like one of the trends that's driving this, or maybe the main driver of this trend, is the aging of the baby boomer population, right? They're starting to look towards, and they're looking at their health span as well as their lifespan, right? They have a growing collection as a group, a growing collection of, lifestyle related diseases, age related diseases, and things like that. And it is interesting to see things moving forward on so many different fronts. Another one that I was excited about was Liz Parrish did the telomerase, the genetic research there. She also, when I interviewed her, she'd mentioned she did a muscle growth factor, and apparently that had measurable results. So as you've mentioned, it's probably a combinatorial therapy for aging, but I mean, literally every possible avenue that's out there seems like it's being explored right now. And so that's why it's so exciting, because it may take 20 different things, but there are 20 different therapies being developed. So, it's all there. Now, since I mentioned the boomers, one of the things, again, this is kind of psychological. As people age, we lose their human culture, their capital, and their life experience. And that's something that we've taken for granted as a society. I interview a lot of scientists, and for me, one of the reasons, it sounds a little morbid, but one of the reasons that I like to do interviews is to try and capture the essence of brilliance while a lot of these scientists are still with us. I interviewed, for instance, I interviewed Dr. Robert Bussard, and he passed away about 6 months later, and I guess the challenge there is an individual like that. He spent 60 or 70 years perfecting his craft, specializing, learning, teaching himself. And when he left us, all of that was gone. How do you think that will change things? I mean, how does that factor into things if we're able to help retain this massive investment in productivity and, and thought that goes into each person, I guess?
Well, you've touched upon some immeasurable desire or inspiration that I have when we talk about this kind of things, and the pain associated with when we're losing very talented people. And that's just like I mentioned before, I like to run this little social experiments with people and asking this kind of provocative in a way questions. And so when I talk to people, let's say later generation or older, and I ask, well, imagine what would you do? What would you do if, let's say, we can reverse 30 years, and so you can feel young and inspired again and capable? What would you do different? What would you do now? And people, a lot of time goes into the stupor. They're like, I don't know, I haven't thought about this, but what? And what is like? Just imagine in the perfect universe, what would you do? And I see it, and it's a beautiful thing, and you can see in their eyes some movement is happening, and they're like, well, if I really could, so, and I would, and they, and you see they get inspired, and you see this life force goes back into them, and they start thinking, yeah, I would go back to science, or I would go back to helping, or I would study a new science or something like that. So you see this life not only on physiological level, but also on psychological, emotional level. This life force comes back because there's hope. And so, if you don't mind, I'll talk about this couple of things that very inspire me in this of longevity. Is There's actually numerous studies, and if you would like, I can send you some references after the conversation. Their studies show us that, and we're going back to existential psychology, existentialism, people who have aim, people who have something worth living, meaningful to them, seems, and it's scientifically proven, have a longer lifespan. So even there's a study on centenarians, every one of them that been interviewed had some kind of idea why they should live, some kind of aim, some kind of being useful. So the idea is to being useful. It doesn't have to be anything significant, but the idea is to be useful either to their family or to whatever they're trying to do, even to finish their garden. It doesn't have to be big. So that is very important, to have some kind of aim, some kind of being useful to the society or to somebody, right? So this is in a way to justify why they live longer. So this is a very, very important thing. And there's actually a couple more things that I want to talk about. So there's a personality. People who seem to be extroverted or socialized seem to have a longer life. People who have learned to express themselves emotionally tend to have a longer life. People, and I really love that one, and I think you would appreciate that as well. People who have been honest, and it's difficult for me for Russian speaking to pronounce. Maybe you can help me with this a little bit. Conscientiousness.
Okay.
People who are very honest about their life and living a life that is honest with themselves and with other people tend to live longer. So whatever that was, and it's a very beautiful thing. So another thing that just recently and his name is Dr. Nir Barkley, and I will send you some references as well. He mentioned, so there's a study that talked about centenarians, and they were talking about what makes these people live so long. Is there genes, or what is this, right? So and they found it's very, I'm sure that has to do with genetics, but it's also was a very prominent they've noticed that in an old age, people who had a low level of growth hormone, IGF, tend to live longer. We're talking about centenarians right now. So centenarians had almost twice as much lower levels of growth hormone than people who passed earlier. Very interesting, very something that I really paid attention to.
Okay.
So, yeah, growth hormone. So it's good when you're young, and it's not so good when you're getting old.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I guess in some ways it does make sense, right? I mean, you from what I've seen, people who are larger tend to have more joint problems, back problems, things along those lines. So, maybe that kind of plays a factor. Now, do you think that longevity, I think another factor is in modern society, and again, I think this is something that psychologically we take this for granted, I guess, but it used to be once upon a time. In fact, I think the traditional Jewish tradition was when a boy turned 12, he was considered a man. And then it was, for many years, it was you turn 18 and you're considered an adult, you graduate high school. Then it was a bachelor's degree, and now we have people with PhDs, masters, 2 masters like yourself. We are pushing the education window. We're pushing that window where we train people and get them specialized up to 30% of the human lifespan. So, I guess what I'm kind of wondering is, does that even work unless we have a longer lifespan? Does that make sense? We're spending a lot of time, energy, and resources training and educating people. Now, back in the old days, it wasn't an issue. It was tied to biology. It was if you're able to reproduce, you're considered an adult. Now it's if you're able to be a contributing member of society and you're able to, achieve these goals and these benchmarks. But at the same time, that shortens our productive working careers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's something that I've kind of wondered about. Again, this for me, this goes to the loss of human culture capital and life experience. We invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in each human being just in training them, and then they invest millions of dollars in themselves, right? Through life experience, through gaining, all of the things that go into being a human being. And when we lose them, it's just washed away. That's, so it seems like that's a fundamental thing that may have to change in the human mind.
Absolutely. I just imagine it's humongous capital. If a person like unfortunate example that the scientist passed away, imagine if we can reverse, give him another 20 years. I mean, how much more productive that could be, or all. But here's being advocate of the devil. So people say there's a lot of people who arguments would be, well, there's not enough space on this earth, right? So they would fiercely fight with you, right, and trying to convince you that radical life extension is not good for you, so you need to step away and give the younger generation a chance, right? So, and we talk about this, and so because the idea is it's fear of unknown, really, right? So, and when we talk about okay, so imagine the situation. Okay, so all these older people, will give them a chance, so they're gonna be more productive. Imagine how many ideas, how many new even types of direction and science that we have no idea about can be developed, right? So what about space exploration? So we have Earth, right? So first of all, we can make it smarter choices, and this Earth is definitely suitable for more than what we have now, right? So if we live conscientiously and smart and using science and etc., but there's different planets, right? So with this potential intellectual growth, we have a potential unlimited options. So
Oh,
and
yeah.
right, so exponentially more variables and options and how we can expand, really. So that's what it is.
And, this is an aside, and I again I should apologize for taking the topic so far off, but I started to do a story on overpopulation. This was 3 or 4 years ago. I started doing research on a written story I was working on. And my premise starting out was overpopulation. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this? And I actually had to abandon that story. I wrote another one that was incredibly optimistic. As I was doing research for it, what I found was and I found a bunch of really amazing supporting information as well. Um, Basically, I found some scientific studies that indicate that our population will probably peak around 11 billion people. And they're suggesting that it may actually decline to the point where, like in Japan, they're actually paying women to have children. They have a city, I don't remember the name of it, where they try and incentivize having children just to keep the population up. And so it appears that as human civilization continues to advance, like humanity on a global scale may be in a similar position, disregarding longevity, even assuming that people live normally as they do now. It looks like birth rates will start to drop. And as I did more research for this, I asked myself, well, why would this transition point happen? There are some mathematical reasons for it, but the number one cause for that was women's education, which I thought was interesting. And the anecdote in the article that I cited was there was a researcher in rural India, and he was interviewing women about reproductive birth control and reproductive health. And he said he noticed that these women in their robes kept fidgeting. They were, and he didn't understand what it was, but they kept reaching for, doing things with their robes. And he was out in the rural part of India without a lot of money, without, a lot of resources. And at one point, one of the women reached into her robe and he saw what she was doing. She was actually silencing her cell phone, right? They had smartphones. And what he realized was, even in rural India with no other access to information at all of these people had access to the internet through their smartphones, and they were all picking up education through using those. And so that, for him, that was his premise. He said that increases in education lower birth rates. And he anticipated that would be a major causal factor in reducing population growth.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So hopefully that part of the equation may solve itself. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And there's, as I said, what I believe in, and that proves me very often than not that nature, and we're part of nature, always finds a suitable solution. And there's not only one usually solution, there's several solutions. So, and I believe there are solutions, and there's with increasing our intellectual property through longevity, through education, there's different venues to that. We can increase exponentially the solutions.
Now, one of the things that people go through, again, these stages of life, right? A lot of people have a midlife crisis. I've heard that that's an American invention. We created the midlife crisis, but um, you know, how do you foresee some of those things changing if we ameliorate lifespan? I mean, if someone doesn't know that they've reached middle age, right? If they can live as long as they want, how do you see that changing some of these phases of life that we go through?
Well, right now I'm just fantasizing, hypothetically speaking, right? So maybe if we live 300 years, maybe we'll have 3 different age crisis, middle age crisis, maybe 5, who knows? And I think middle age crisis is usually, like you rightfully mentioned, it's an understanding or realization, oh my God, time is ticking, what have I done? So there's basically, it's a normal self-reflection, right? So it's a self-reflection type of thing. So every individual goes through, hopefully the thinking one go through. And so it's basically you look at what you've done, where you're right at this moment, and then what's coming. So and you make hopefully good decisions for yourself, healthy decisions for yourself. So I would say it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have, not maybe crisis, but a reflection on where you're at the moment, and changing career, maybe for the betterment of your own self. So
Okay.
I think,
yeah. So it sounds like this is really unexplored territory. It truly is. We just don't know until we get there how this will change a lot of those things. So
we can just make an assumption or fantasize about things. But definitely, I mean, one of the things that was very interesting to me, hypothetically speaking, obviously, so there's a movie, and I remember this, some kind of the series movie about, okay, so the scenario goes like this. So we achieved immortality, so we achieved the radical life extension, so we live in a society where it's all possible. So parents, they look young and as children. So, and the catastrophic event that happened in a society was that children themselves didn't want to reproduce anymore because they didn't see a need for them.
okay.
So that was a big, so they couldn't find themselves in the society because they felt useless. So, oh my God, so all of these positions are taken, so there's not a future. So they found themselves, and there was a big, the whole movie was about suicidal, why there's a lot of suicides start happening in the younger population in this kind of society. So I think, so we don't know what kind of, what it's just an example of, we don't know what's going to come out of this. So there's challenges, but I believe in humanity. I believe that whatever challenge will present itself, we'll have a solution for that.
Absolutely. Well, one of the other things that I should touch on, again, I'm just referring to my notes here, but again, psychologically speaking, age-related mental decline, right? And this comes in so many different factors and types. I mean, you have Alzheimer's, you have Parkinson's, I've read about mini strokes, so there are vascular issues, many types of age-related decline in the elderly. Oftentimes, especially with the onset, you don't know, right? They just start to they start to function more poorly, and you start to notice issues for years sometimes before it's diagnosed. How do you see, some of these life extension technologies being able to help reverse, I guess, again, something that's been taken for granted, right? We look at elderly people, and if they're forgetting things, if they're not functioning so well, we just say, well, they're older, of course, as opposed to diagnosing it and saying, well, there could be an issue.
And it's very, very big thing, and it's actually more physiological, medical issue versus psychological, because the psychological, it's more has to do with diagnosis like depression, which could be also comorbid.
Okay.
Right, so we're talking about more medical issue like Alzheimer's, dementia, and things like that. It has to do more with the physiological aging and medical condition, but they go hand in hand. So, for example, even people, let's just put aside for a second those medical conditions. We're talking about semi-healthy older people, right? So let's say they don't have those medical diagnoses. However, I'm working with some clients like that, and what I've noticed is just a loss of desire for life, just because of the physiological, the way for the sarcopenia. Talking about just they would love to walk, they would love to do something, but they just feel always tired, and not necessarily because they're ill.
I see what you mean.
Yes, it's just, and like I said, it's very important to have this desire for life, and explain to yourself, why do you want to live? What's the purpose? Because imagine the situation. Well, we're talking about this gerontologic depression, right? So people who are older, often, and it's sometimes it seems unethical to talk about this for some reasons, kind of like a taboo, the societal taboo about talking about the depression of older people. But there's a big event. It's a big thing that's happening. Not only, as I said, taking aside the obvious medical condition that can drive to that situation, but just talking about the depression itself. Imagine a lot of the same age people start passing away. So there's untreated trauma, loss, fear for the future. Right, so and it's the whole situation surrounding the old age and everything is just very sad in a way. So
it is. Now, so you've looked at, and I'm sure you have, in terms of transhumanism, they're age reversal, I guess, which is moving forward rapidly. This isn't the only solution. There's also been cryotransport, right? And I'm I'm friends with Natasha Vita Moore, and her partner Max Moore. Of course, they're with Alcor. So there are also options maybe for mental uploading. Have you looked at any of those at all?
Well, I'm definitely aware, and I've met with Natasha and Max, and I used to live in Los Angeles, so I've met all these beautiful people, the stars of transhumanism and Russian ones, and because that's my passion, right? So I've looked at it. I cannot tell you that I'm an expert or going to claim any expert statements about this. I believe it's one of the options, great options. However, like I say for myself, while I am alive, I would like to find a solution that works for a living person. So I'm very heavily biomedicine. I mean, this is great to have now option to preserve my body for whatever, or mind uploading, great. However, while I'm living, I would like to work on a solution keeping myself alive. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote. Yeah, there was a Woody Allen quote about that. I'm sure you've heard it. He said, "Some people seek immortality through their work. I want to seek immortality by not dying." Right. Um, Now, I would also like to, again, a little bit off topic, but one of the things that I have noticed online is the transhumanism community is giant in Russia. Do you think there's an aspect of Russian and Eastern European culture that seems to lend itself to that? I'm not sure what it is. It's just anecdotal, but what I've noticed is, in America, it seems like it's very much kind of the status quo, right? And there are people who are interested in it. There is a big transhumanist culture, but it seems like it blends in and kind of disappears. But when I go into the transhumanist forums and when I look like on Facebook at these groups, it seems like there is an explosion of interest in Russia and Eastern Europe. Do you think would that be the case? And is it cultural in nature?
It's a very interesting question. I would like to find an answer. I never thought about this, but it's true. It's true. I think it's the first thing that comes to my mind is culturally speaking. It's probably we're very curious. But America, I've lived half of my life in America, and I can say the same about American people. So
yeah,
I think it's I would say the transhumanist, the life extension. See, because there's different transhumanism, but there's different other cultures that talk about life extension. Actually, Americans are leading in all this life extension therapies and different methods and different vitamins. I mean, it's humongous. What is it called? Nutraceuticals
oh yeah.
market, multi-billion-dollar market, and it's just. But in Europe, I mean, it's developing, but we're far behind. I think nowadays, and my hope, being a transhumanist and futurist and things like that, hopefully it wouldn't matter. It's Russian, it's American, it's Japan, whatever it is. So we're all humans, and we have this same goal: stay alive and go to stars, pursue our life goals and things like that, and just be happy. So hopefully this little borders will erase itself pretty soon.
Oh, and I think that they already are. I think that they already are. I mean, you're in Europe right now, and we're talking in real time, right? We're using Zoom, and well, I do that all of the time. My day job, that's down in Texas, and that's all virtual. I live in the Seattle area, and it would be the same thing. I have teleconferences with friends in Russia who are doing programming. Yeah, so I think that those borders are already erasing themselves. It's largely just psychological, and I think that there's also, of course, government and national momentum as well. But yeah, and I think that we're going to continue to see more change as well. It is interesting, like for instance, right now that the war in Ukraine is happening. And one of the questions is what happens when you have these national conflicts and things like that, and people from all over the world can share information in real time on what's going on? How does that change the dialogue on a state level? And I think we've already seen that with Iraq and Afghanistan in the United States as well. So I think that the borders are erasing themselves. We just have to kind of redefine how those boundaries are outlined, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely, and especially in scientific community, there should usually no ethnical and hope for conflicts and things like that. especially.
Yeah. Now, in the scientific community, one of the things that I've seen, and again, just as an aside, is it seems like the major improvement has been in translation software, right? So that people in France can read English papers, people in Russia can read English, and vice versa. And in the past, that was a major challenge. But like Google Translate has been a wonderful tool. And so one of the things that I found with my own work is it used to be there was a hard boundary. If I found something that was written in German or Russian or French, I was stuck. But now I can translate that and I can reach out to the author in their own language and communicate back and forth. So that's been a giant benefit for me, at least.
Energy breakthrough, major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lika, on that note, I think we're all set for today. Thank you so much for your time. It has been an honor and a privilege to have you on. I would love to have you back sometime if you're open to it. And okay, well, let me wrap things up for today. Let me thank you again and have a wonderful weekend, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a beautiful daytime, I believe, right?
Yes, yes, it's only noon here.
Okay, it's evening here. So pleasure talking to you, Tim, and so looking forward to potentially some other interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
again.